Welcome to today's Q&A live stream. Today we are going to talk about what I personally believe is the best self-publishing platform for authors, way better than Amazon KDP, and that is selling direct. I'm Deborah, and I write and illustrate bilingual kids' picture books that rhyme in Cantonese and English, and I also write adult epic fantasy under my pen name Delilah Wine. And I've been selling direct almost since day one of being a self-published author. However, I am very much not good at it, which is why I've got two of my wonderful self-published fantasy blog off. I can never say the full name, SPFBO, authors who are much better at selling direct, here to share their wisdom with us. So tell us a little bit about who you are, your books, and how long you've been selling direct.
Hi, I'm Emma. I write fantasy as Emma L. Adams. I also write paranormal mysteries as L. Adams. I've been self-published for 10 years now. Well, not self-published. I started out small press, but actual self-publishing 9 years somehow. The actual selling direct for about a year and a half. That's when I set up my direct store. Although I did have a Patreon before that, but actually selling directly from my own store sort of started about a year and a half ago ish. Pretty much everything I write is some flavor of fantasy. I'm pretty much trying to publish as widely as possible now. I started out wide, then went exclusive, then went wide again, and now I'm staying there. So yeah.
My name is Lauren. I write under the name LL MacRae. I started publishing back in 2017 and I've been publishing direct pretty much since then. I always think of myself as having a very topsy-turvy approach because it's not really the norm for what most indie authors do. I definitely threw myself in the deep end there. I have 17 books published, including a couple of short stories in anthologies. I've always been direct with the physical books, and I've only recently gone direct by coming out of KU with my ebooks since it was either October or November last year, so not even a year for the digital side of things. I write epic fantasy. I tend to write things with dragons in it. I tend to write things with bucket loads of magic, found family, lots of less mainstream characters, sort of people caught in the wrong place at the wrong time rather than chosen ones. And I write primarily for escapism. So my books are good if you want to lose yourself in a really awesome fantasy world with loads of world building and magic and fun adventures going on when it's really horrible outside. And you just want to escape into something a bit more hopeful for a few hours.
I think we can all use a little bit of that these days. The world is just a little bit wild. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the channel. Today's agenda is going to be pretty straightforward. We'll start by discussing what selling direct means and why authors might want to sell direct. And then we're going to dig into some of the exciting parts, the where and the how of selling direct. And then finally, we'll open up for some general questions before wrapping up. And today we'll be taking questions and running polls through the Slido app. On your screen in the chat box, you'll see a pinned comment in the chat that has the link to the Slido app, and you can come through and answer some of the polls here. And if you've got questions for the panelists, you can drop those in there as well. And we'll be taking questions throughout, and any questions that we don't get to, we'll make sure we get to in the general wrap-up. So the first poll that we've got running is whether or not selling direct is currently part of your overall strategy as an author. And I can see we've got one response here. Somebody is already selling direct, which is great to see. So everybody else in the chat, let us know whether you're where you're at with selling direct. Let's start by talking about what selling direct actually is. And to do that, we kind of have to go into the whole value chain in the publishing industry, which is fancy business speak for how a book goes from being an idea in an author's head to something that a reader actually reads. Now, I've got a whole nother video that goes into way more detail, but for today's purposes, here's what a simplified version of that value chain looks like under a traditional publishing model. And you can see there's all sorts of these entities in the middle between the author and the reader. And of course, what we do with self-publishing is that we skip past that publisher entity because essentially the author and the publisher are the same person. And so we're going straight to printers and distributors and retailers ourselves because the publishing industry has a very high level of consolidation. And often these other entities are just the same place. So with KDP, for example, they actually are both the printer and the distributor and the retailer and they also ship. What we're doing here when we're selling direct is we're actually cutting past all of these other players in the middle so that we as authors, in addition to cultivating a direct connection to our readers through things like our newsletters, we're also extending that to the actual customer lifecycle part of the relationship. They actually buy from us, and we kind of have the whole view of how they find us and become part of our readership, hopefully for life. With that out of the way, I want to ask our panelists, why did you decide to sell direct?
I'm a control freak. I mean, that's why I went indie in the first place. I started out when they brought in Kindle Unlimited. I was initially enrolled in that because it was more convenient, and also like at the time I was getting more page reads than sales, so I couldn't really justify it. And then kind of gradually over time, I always planned, it was kind of a long-term strategy. I didn't really think of selling direct as an actual thing, but I never liked the idea of being dependent on one retailer. So I kind of started gradually moving some of my books out of exclusivity, but I only did it with the series that weren't really selling much anyway. And then around a couple of years ago, I got caught in one of Amazon's glitches where they were like, we don't recognize your bank account details or something like that. And that was the first time I'd had that specific glitch. There'd been other incidents as well, but that was like the final straw. So like a couple of weeks following that, I started taking my fantasy books out of exclusivity. My mysteries are still exclusive, but the fantasy books, like over the course of a couple of months, I took them out just straight in one go. And then I had a bit of a task on my hand uploading them everywhere. This is around the time that I started considering doing Kickstarter already for my next epic fantasy series. It was a year before I actually did it, but that was when I had the idea in my head. So I thought, and then I'd started to see authors kind of talking about selling direct from their websites. So I kind of did a deep dive in like research over the next like 6 months or so, and eventually I decided that I would get that set up with my backlist, and then with the print books and stuff as well. So that took a while. Yeah, it took a few weeks to set it up, and involved a lot of talking with my accountant. But that side of things wasn't fun. But with the selling direct store, it was really time consuming. But like once it was set up, I knew that I had all the books added, and it was kind of done. And then after that, I could drive readers there like first like the website, and then kind of, because I just switched, I already had my web domain, so I just switched it over. So it was the same website address, just now it's Shopify instead of Weebly or whatever it was I was using before. So I'm still tweaking things on the store. I think it's going to be a constant work in progress, really. But yeah, I like the control. I just don't see myself ever going back from that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tweaking will never ever end. It's just like constant maintenance, new ideas, new shiny thoughts, and ways to improve. I started selling direct from sort of day dot, mostly because I decided to make publishing really hard for myself. So I don't know why. So basically, when it came to publishing my first book, the thing that I was kind of more focused on than anything was the physical copy, the paperback. So I looked into KDP's print books and the way they, you can set up your cover and formatting and things like that. And I didn't really like how limited it was. I mean, it's perfectly fine. It makes sense for, trying out when you first start and you don't really know what you're doing. And then once you do know what you're doing, you can make it work for you better. But I wanted to have more bells and whistles on my paperback. So my debut series has like embossing on the title and the spine. The pages are a different thickness and size and color and little sort of tweaks like that. And the only way I could get that kind of finish was to go to a printer and get a print run made up, like the traditional people. So I never created like a KDP print on demand or through Ingram Spark or Lulu or any of those. I just went straight to a printer, said, this is what I would like, please, and had my first print run made of I think it was 150 books was my very first. And it was delivered to my work, and I was watching the delivery guy all through the day for my first ever pallet of books to turn up. And then obviously I had 150 books that I had physically with me. They weren't with a distributor, they weren't with Amazon's warehouse or anything like that. So I had to sell them direct to sell them, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. I did briefly look at creating just a seller account as if you were selling other things than books on Amazon, in which case you pay to send it to their warehouse, and then you pay them them 70% for them to do it for you. And I thought, yeah, I'll not do that. I'll try and figure it out myself. So I had 150 books physically, and I created a WordPress website with a little PayPal button. That was how I first started. So it was just like an image, like a terrible image, like from my phone, of like the book on a table, like at my office, with like a potted plant and a little PayPal button that I created. And that was like my first ever selling direct. And then I went to events and things like that. So I completely went at it. I wouldn't say in the wrong way anymore, but I definitely went at it from a different angle than I think most people would. You know, from the financial cost up front and the distributing issues up front and all of that I had to figure out like from day one. But that's pretty much been it ever since. And I've streamlined that and refined that. And that's how I do most of my direct sales for paperbacks anyway, still to this day, 7 years later.
I love that, because I think as someone who started doing this whole self-publishing thing a lot later than you guys, like the advice I remember getting when you're first starting out is who was I following? I was reading David Gogren's like Let's Get Digital, like whatever the first book he has, which is, you know, that walks you through the whole self-publishing thing. And I just remember like there was this whole section in there where he was like, you know, like as a self-pub author, like 99% of your sales are all going to be, you know, ebook copies, and it just makes sense for you to go straight to KDP. Like, and he was one of the self-publishing gurus out there. I don't use the term guru in a bad way for him, because he does know what he's talking about. But he was one of the gurus out there who he was at least relatively on the fence about the whole KU versus Y debate, whereas there were a lot of other people who were basically like, you know, keep it easy for yourself, just go straight to KU. They're like 90% of the market anyway. The only thing I think I did differently from everybody else was I was just kind of like, well, okay, I'll try this KU thing out, really. But because I started out with picture books, and with picture books, when you read with kids, they need to be physical copies. I started being wide with my kids' books from the beginning. I did print on demand because, like, as Lauren talked about, that minimum number for a print run, like that was a very scary thing to me. I was just like, I know it's very niche language, like not that many people speak Cantonese relative to Mandarin. And I was just like, I don't know if I can sell 100 books. I know, like in hindsight, 100 books it sounds a lot when you've sold nothing. But once you start selling, 100 books is actually not that much. And so in hindsight, I think if I could go back and tell myself, you know, 3 or 4 years ago when I started doing this, I think I would have wanted to go to the route that Lauren ended up going, because the margins for me on print on demand is they're non-existent for my kids' books, because they are full color interior, they are hardcovers. It cost me something like $15 per unit to print. It is just,
wow,
it's a lot. And because again, they're kids' books, you can't, like, people want the hardcovers, but to make any money on the hardcovers, because the printing cost is so high, I have to price them at something like at least $20 to $25, depending on whatever currency you're doing it in. And that just means like people are paying a lot more, and I'm making like $1 per book. Whereas if I had done what Lauren had done and gone straight to an offset printer and, you know, just backed myself and did like a small print run, like 150 books, I think the unit cost on those probably would have halved at least. And then I could actually sell it for a much more competitive price. So for me, the reason for going direct is I just keep looking at that chain of middlemen in the middle and just going, what are you guys doing for me that you know is worth giving you all this money? Because I think about it and it's like, well, I have to send I'm doing all the hard work of doing all the marketing. Like nobody is finding my book unless I'm telling them to go and find my book on your shop. So you're just a storefront to me. I'm not really seeing like all of the boosts that people say you get from like, you know, priming the algorithm, but maybe that's just because I don't sell enough and I haven't done promo stacking and all of those things. But at the end of the day, I still come back to, well, if I'm the one paying for all the promos, why don't I just drive people to my page? Like I can still have a button for retailers. If they get to my page and they're like, I don't want to buy from you, they can still click that other button and go somewhere else. So that was basically where my head has been at in terms of selling direct. The next question I want to ask you guys is, what do you think stops most authors from jumping into direct sales?
I think a lot of it is that fear of, firstly, an investment up front. Secondly, having stock that doesn't sell, taking up room, and it like the fear of failing is a lot more intense, I think, when you're doing it yourself. Writing a book and publishing is making yourself quite vulnerable anyway, and this is almost like an added layer of vulnerability to that. So everyone can see clearly if you're crashing and burning or not moving or doing well or whatever. And I think that is quite a big block, as well as the associated work to go behind it, because like you said, you're doing a lot of work self-publishing anyway, and again, it's another step of stuff to do that you don't necessarily have to do if you don't want. So why put all of that extra time and effort into learning how to set up storefronts and how to arrange distribution and all of that kind of thing? It can be very daunting, especially if you don't know what you don't know, and then it just feels sort of overwhelming and insurmountable.
I just remember when I first started self-publishing, again, like with the Kickstarter, months, nearly a year of research before I actually did it, just because there's just so much. And even then you end up learning a lot of it as you go, just because you don't know what you don't know. And then you find stuff after you've already published, and then it's kind of almost like feel like you're always playing catch up. But it seems to get more complicated every year as well. Like, I mean, I was wide to start off with, but not for long. But even if I'd started out in KU, I think just learning your way around the retailer, learning your way around the publishing process, the formatting. I use Vellum now. That takes about a minute. I didn't have that. I used Microsoft Word for paperbacks. That's about the worst way you can do it. So just that part of the process. And like, I remember I didn't have a Mac at the time, so I couldn't upload to Apple directly. So I was trying to use Smashwords, and that was a whole other, like, just learning all these sites, all these retailers. I saw it as a whole other language, and that's on top of the actual writing. And I'd been writing books for years at that point, so I'd at least got some of that down. But just finding cover artists and editors was new to me, and like getting all the timing to kind of add up. And then after I published, I found out about promo sites, and like I had started a newsletter. At least I managed to do that before it self-published, but that was another thing you have to learn. It does feel like when you're just starting out, the amount of stuff that you have to know, the list just keeps getting longer and longer with every year. Because I mean, direct sales was not on my radar at all at the time. And apparently I backed a Kickstarter in like 2015-16, but I've got no memory of this. So like I didn't really rediscover the site again until like 2 years ago. So it's just daunting, really, everything.
We've talked a lot about the benefits of selling direct and the reasons why we've sold direct. What do you think might be some reasons that people shouldn't sell direct? I'm a fairly techie person, and I am that person who will sit there and read the help files and the manuals on everything, even IKEA furniture, before I start putting it together. So I often approach this question of, well, like, why not? The incremental cost, I think, having gone through the process of setting it all up. For me personally, it is not as big a mountain as you think it is going through, but I do know that I have a very skewed perspective on this. So have you, in your experience, come across any reasons where it would be probably not the right thing for somebody to try and sell direct?
I mean, I suppose the best reason not to is that you don't have to. You can still be perfectly successful going like down the path of least resistance. Just upload to KU, get your marketing and ads on point. And there are many very successful authors who just do that, and they don't worry about direct. I think a lot of the time because they just want to focus on writing and do the bare minimum in terms of the publishing side of things, which is a perfectly valid avenue. I don't know if I will do direct sales for all of my future series. It kind of depends on the series and where it fits and how sort of well it sells and how much I can maximize that, and whether it's the added revenue is worth the time and investment to set that side of things up. So the best reason not to is probably just because you don't have to, especially if it's like your debut and you're just kind of finding your feet. And then you can sort of make a decision of, 6 months down the line, a year down the line, maybe when you have a few more books, and you can decide where it would best fit.
I mean, yeah, because it's something you can do when you're starting out, but I mean, I probably wouldn't have done just because it's an extra thing to learn, and having only one book, and then that would not have covered like the setup fees. I guess it depends which way that you like depends like which site you use, whether it's a Kickstarter is obviously different to selling direct from a store. So, and then like whether you can really put in the time investment again. I mean, for me, the reason it took so long was because I have a backlist. So it probably wouldn't have taken as long if I'd only had one book. But then it would have been a question of, is this going to be worth it? Is it going to pay off, or is it something that I should do later? So I would have kind of had to have weighed that up really, and like the time and just learning your way around everything. So I think that's like probably the biggest barrier, time, and whether it's almost worth putting that time into writing more books, especially I mean, it depends how fast you write, but I kind of used to write a lot quicker, but I definitely found that my writing speed went way down when I was trying to set up all these retailers at the same time. And if you have like a demanding day job or like no free time, it's just kind of, you have to sort of weigh up the options of whether it's going to be worth putting in that time in the advert. It's probably something that I would have done eventually. It's just whether I would have done it right away.
Yeah. That's so true though about it eating into your writing time, because you think, oh, I'm an author, you get to daydream all day and plot and do all that fun stuff all day, but it almost shrinks to such a small percentage of the amount of time you spend on your author business, like as a whole, when you do take the extra step for direct, that it really is a balance. Like when I do Comic-Cons, I'm like exhausted the day after, sometimes even 2 days. So that's 2 days of writing that I'm going to lose just for this one thing. And that is such a balancing act of like how much time you can afford to spend on each aspect of the business that you maybe wouldn't realize it, you need that much time to dedicate to.
100%. And I think you guys have made some really excellent points, because we often, I think when we're starting out, we think of these decisions as like it is an either or, right? You think, oh my God, like I either have to be in KU or I either have to be wide. And it really isn't that kind of do or die decision, because you can go into KU, you can come out of KU, you can take things wide, you can take things exclusive. And if you don't go direct with your first book, you can go direct with your third, fifth, eighth, 10th book, which I think is really helpful just to put everything into context. And especially for those who are watching who are not familiar with Emma's work, Emma has like, I want to say 30 or 40 books in the entire backlog. It's a massive, massive backlog, which is just amazing, right? But there is, I think, an incredible power in trying to bank up and get that backlog going, because it does give you a whole lot more options in terms of how you go about running your business as an author, which is a really nice segue to the next part of the session. Because the thing that fascinates me about this whole conversation about selling direct is I see one thing come up in my feed, but then I see a totally different thing in my actual author dashboard. So a little while ago, I ran this poll on Twitter, and a lot of readers actually said, given the option to buy direct, I would actually buy direct. And it was a lot more people than I was expecting, because I honestly thought this poll would come back with, 90% of people just on Amazon KU. I was surprised to see the support for people wanting to buy direct from the author, except when I went and asked the authors, everybody was like, yeah, Amazon is it's most of my sales. And so I think this data is reflecting a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, simply because of the learning curve that's involved in setting up direct. And so there's already a lot less authors, I think anecdotally, who are wide. And of that wide part, I think there are even less who are going direct. So I'm really curious about where you guys sell direct these days, because there are a whole heap of places. The 5 that I've kind of broken down is we've all talked about having our own e-store. Lauren's talked about selling in person at book fairs and cons and markets. There's also crowdfunding through Kickstarter and Indiegogo, like Emma's mentioned. There's also author subscriptions, like through Patreon. You both have Patreons, and there's a newer platform, I think, called Ream these days. And my cat is choking on me. Sorry, buddy. But then the 5th option, right, which I tend to see more in the kidlit space, and which I have not dipped my toe into, is speaking engagement. So a lot of the successful kidlit and picture book authors that I know, they make the majority of their income by setting up school visits. So they literally spend maybe 3 days a week working on new books and the other general publishing stuff, and then the other 2 days of the week they're on the road. They're driving to schools and they're doing school events and doing direct selling through these school visits. So with you guys, where do you currently sell direct, and which of these options was the easiest for you to set up?
I mentioned Shopify. That's what I use for my website. So I sell direct through my store. I also have a Patreon. That's kind of a side thing, and I've also done Kickstarter. So I do three of the options. Well, Kickstarter is kind of a one-off thing, whereas the store, that's the thing, and the Patreon, they keep going. So they're all kind of like different strategies. It's that multiple income streams, wide publishing kind of thing. That's why I do it that way, because Kickstarter, it's big, it's flashy, but it takes a lot of time in a short space of time. And then the store, in theory, most of the time is up front with the setup. And then in theory, it keeps ticking along in the background unless I keep fiddling with it. But
yeah, so for me, have a web shop, I have a Patreon, but like Emma, it is more of a side thing. It's not like I'm not releasing new content like on a weekly or monthly basis or anything like that. I think I would literally melt from or explode just from the sheer amount of effort that would take. And then I also do sell mostly direct to Comic-Cons. Writing Fantasy Comic-Con is a perfect audience for that. And occasionally like smaller local craft fairs, Christmas fairs, things like that, where they want to support local sellers and craftspeople. So those are my main ones. I've never done a Kickstarter or any sort of crowdfunding before. Yeah, that's a scary thing that I have not yet dived into.
Which avenues of selling direct have you guys found have not worked as effectively as you thought they might?
Patreon, to be fair, I feel like I didn't I set it up in March 2020, which impeccable timing there. It was, the strategy with that was kind of, I think I would have more luck with it if I committed to. I don't think I could write like fresh fiction, like a short story a month. I think that would take away too much of my actual writing time. And then I don't work far enough ahead to like serialize on like a chapter by chapter basis, because my process involves too much rewriting. I just don't think that would work. So the way that I set it up was it was supposed to be kind of readers who wanted to support me outside of Amazon could get the books early, but then my publishing schedule slowed way down. So the kind of value from that, I feel like it wasn't quite as kind of, I thought that I'd be publishing more frequently when I first set it up. So at the moment, I'm just doing like monthly updates, and again, it's just having too much to do. Kind of, it's one of the things. It's like a low priority because the other stuff just takes up too much of my attention. So that's why I think it hasn't quite been quite as effective. But I mean, it's a steady thing. It kind of keeps doing its thing. I try to remember to share it with my newsletter and stuff like that. But it's not. I don't like actively like do like a ton of promotion on like a consistent basis. Like whereas with a Kickstarter, it's like every day it's all Kickstarter, everyone. Because it's very focused in a short period of time. So I find I've had more luck with the store and with the Kickstarters than I have with the Patreon.
Yeah, I imagine the time-based urgency of a Kickstarter helps with promo, because it's very much like if you don't now, then in 30 days or less, it's going to be gone, whereas a patron is kind of always there. Similar to you, Emma, my patron is definitely a marathon more than a sprint in terms of like growth and building that consistency. I think I created my Patreon in the wrong mindset. I think I created it thinking, right, I will do exclusive writing for those people who sign up to it. When I started it, I did a chapter a month of a completely exclusive story that I've never published anywhere else. But I found that I was very quickly getting burnt out because I really struggle to juggle different writing projects. I like to do one thing and then move on to the next, then the next. So if I have to like spend a morning or a few days on one thing and then go back to like my main project, both of them will suffer. My posting schedule really dwindled. And then when I started treating Patreon as more like a coffee type, you can tip if you want to support type process, that really helped, because then I felt a lot less guilt about not posting new content all of the time. And now my Patreon has grown I say grown. It's grown from where it was. And I can post a lot more consistent, but I tend to post things like behind the scenes essays, like my approach to writing this, or this. These are the tools I use, like you mentioned Vellum, like, and explaining what Vellum does and what it looks like and what you can do with it and things like that. And the comments that I get are, very often, oh, I had no idea that all of this went into writing a book. And for me, it's bread and butter. Like, it's no effort at all to talk about, well, this is what I do when I upload a book to Amazon. This is what I do to get a book print run created, or anything like that. So I tend to share more behind the scenes author stuff, sneak peeks, things I'm working on as I'm working on them. Like if I'm working on artwork commissions with illustrators, so it's almost like you're with me on my author journey, and then I don't feel obliged to send you exclusive writings, which would take away from my other things. And when I started treating Patreon like that as more of a place for, I don't want to say super fans, because I always feel that sounds like really pig-headed, but I mean, if you want to pay someone just because you like their books, I guess you kind of are. So I just kind of treated it as more of like a bookish community, where if you like my books and you're kind of interested in the author journey side of stuff, this is the place for that. And then people don't feel obliged if, for financial reasons they can't support, don't want to support, they don't feel like they're missing out if they don't support. Most of what goes on Patreon will end up public at some point anyway. So it's more like an exclusive early access. If you happen to have like a few extra pounds a month that you want to contribute, very grateful. They get various benefits like ebooks and audios as I publish them, and a few other, like a discount on my web store and things like that. So that's how I've started treating Patreon, and since I've done that, the growth has definitely been more consistent, I found, and easier on me, because I had like 8 tiers when I started, and that was a mistake, massively mistake.
Oh my gosh, that 8 tiers would be completely intimidating. I have this really weird love-hate relationship with things like Patreon and Ream, because I personally, as a consumer, I loathe subscriptions. I don't do them whenever possible. If I have the option to just pay a one-off fee or an ongoing fee, I will always choose the one-off fee. But from, the creator-author side of things, I can definitely see that a monthly stable income, it is very, very attractive.
Yeah.
The thing Lauren talked about and that Emma talked about with this, how do I put my tiers together? Like, what can I give people to sign up for this Patreon? What value are they going to get from me? Those are all things that have really put me off from doing a Patreon, because at the moment, like the kinds of things that Lauren's talking about like the author journey and going on that stuff, like I'm already using a lot of that content for, things like Instagram and my author newsletter. And so when it comes to Patreon, my brain just locks up, and I'm like, I got no idea. I got no idea of how I would do anything that would give people an incentive to back me. I suppose, and like even with the serialization approach, I know there are lots of other authors doing very well in the lit RPG and the progression fantasy space, where all of their business models are basically, we do Patreon first, you get your launch on Royal Road going, and then after you post your 30 or so chapters to get the momentum going, you move on to Patreon and you get that model going, and then you've got a backlog of, 60 like these guys, they're amazing. Like they're 60 chapters ahead, 2 or 3 books ahead, and it's a whole different ball game when you're running a Patreon first strategy. One thing I really wanted to ask you guys, because Lauren touched on this, is that idea of Patreon being for like super fans. A couple of years ago, Brandon Sanderson himself was actually debating whether or not to start a Patreon, and I've got a whole video analyzing the fan reaction, which can be summed up as hell to the no, please don't. And the main concern from the fan base, and it was just a really interesting thing, because I've been part of the Sanderson fandom for a long time, and he's switched on. He basically never makes a misstep with his fan base, and this was as close to a revolt as you could get. The main concern from that fan base seemed to be was, okay, but if you start a Patreon and you start posting exclusive content on the Patreon with annotations and behind the scenes stuff, and this is how I came up with the story, because of the way he writes his books, and they're kind of like these puzzle boxes with like world building mysteries and things like that, his fandom have an incredible culture around the fact that they're theory crafting and figuring out like all the world building. And so there was this real fear that by doing a Patreon, he was going to divide his fan base between the haves and the have-nots. And I'm really curious, like, have you guys found that to be the case with your fan base? It doesn't sound like you would run into that issue because of how you're utilizing the Patreons. But the thing that gets me with Patreon and with a lot of these other methods, like with Kickstarter, right, is you start moving into well, okay, there's going to be this exclusive content that you're not going to get anywhere else. And I just wonder, like, what kind of relationship does that create with you and between you and your readership?
Yeah, I don't think I have too much exclusive stuff on my Patreon. It was basically, I mean, it started out as you get the books early. I think when I initially, I only had like 3 tiers, and I think people only mainly back me at the get the book early one, and that one is kind of the main one. It's interesting because, yeah, I'm not a fan of subscriptions either. That's the funny part of it. Like, honestly, one of the reasons I love Vellum is because it's a one-time purchase. Like, for instance. So it's one of those weird things. It's like, it's not something, I mean, I support some authors' Patreons, but like not necessarily to get the books early, because they provide like other like content and stuff. But a lot of the time it's stuff that you can then get later on, like if you pay for it. Like, I mean, even with the stuff that I offer on Kickstarter, I then put those books for sale on my website. It's just the Kickstarter people get it early, like a few months early. The editions are almost the same, except like the signature and stuff. But the actual content and like the kind of extras and things like that, it's basically the same. So I'm not sure. I don't think I've had any complaints about exclusive content, but my Patreon is pretty small, so you can get early access. The rest of it is just, I do monthly updates, so I'm just talking about what I'm working on, and a lot of that goes into my newsletter anyway. So I guess it depends on what the fan base kind of expects, and like how much of it is involved, and like how actively they want to participate, and whether that would kind of get in the way of that. But I don't know. People use Patreon and like subscriptions for various different things. It's almost, I mean, the serialization approach is completely different to how I use it. So
yeah, I agree. Like Patreon or any, I guess, subscription based service that you run as an author is kind of what you make of it, really. I think like the serialization is kind of where people that use that as their main direct focus have a completely different game plan to someone like me or Emma, from the sounds of it. What I tried to put there is bonus, but not essential. So almost like you read a magnet for your newsletter. It's more like a little taste of what there is, but you're not going to lose out if you don't have it. An example is I have full color illustrated bookmarks. The bookmark is going to be available for everyone, but if you're on Patreon, you get to see like the artist's work in progress and updates and how they change things and how they refine things. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, it's there at a very small cost. So it's a bonus, but you're not going to miss out because you're still going to see the bookmark whenever it's finished anyway. But it is funny that you asked that, actually, because I'm going to be experimenting with some exclusives probably in summer next year. So my most popular series, I'm going to attempt to write 3 shorts, and they're just going to be Patreon exclusives, because I'm really curious to see whether or not that gets any more interest than what I have at the moment. I think my gut feeling is that if people want to support you on Patreon, they will, regardless of what you put there. So I don't think the exclusivity is going to maybe draw in people that might necessarily have not subscribed anyway. But I don't think it's going to put anyone off, because I think if you're not going to subscribe to Patreon, you're not, regardless of if there's a story there. I can report back to you in summer to let you know if there was a riot on my mailing list of people very angry they could not read these short stories. But yeah, up until now, it's been fine. I have people that are on Patreon that don't even read the posts. They're just supporting just to support, which I find really weird. I'm trying to give you all this stuff so you have meaningful posts to read for your money, and you don't even it's not even like a priority for you, which I find amazing. But like Emma said, people join it for different reasons, and being aware of all of that kind of frames where I put my focus on when I'm thinking about content for Patreon rather than newsletter or socials or just public.
That's a really interesting way to look at it, because I think you are right. We as authors, I don't know about you guys, but like for me, I often sit here and I'm like, oh, like, I don't know, like, will anyone really pay money for this thing that came out of my brain? Like,
Yeah.
I feel bad enough trying to pitch them my book, even though I'm like, no, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of this thing I wrote, and I genuinely believe it is a good book. But like, there is this weird split where, like, the moment I have to go from, hey, I have a book, to, hey, you should pay actual money for my book, it's just like this really wide chasm to cross. So I might actually segue here over to our Kickstarter questions, because Emma has been launching her latest epic fantasy series over on Kickstarter. And the whole Kickstarter business is this thing of, hey, I have a book. It's not even out yet, but please, give me money for my book. Let's talk about what is it like to actually launch a series on Kickstarter, because I've generally been seeing two approaches to Kickstarter in publishing. And number one is you're actually launching a brand new book there ahead of a general retail release. And the second thing is special editions. And I suppose the third thing would be anthologies, would be the other common things I'm seeing. Emma, what made you decide to launch Death's Disciple over on Kickstarter first?
So it was my second epic fantasy series. My first one, I was still launching into KU at the time, and it did not go well. And about a month later was the Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter, the big one, and obviously everyone saw that. I had a Kickstarter account. I'd had an account for years, but I didn't really use it, and for some reason, it didn't really cross my mind. And then I was like, wait, hang on. He writes epic fantasy. I am now also writing epic fantasy, because up until then, I'd mostly been doing kind of urban contemporary fantasy. And I mean, that's very big in KU, which also kind of was one of the reasons that I hadn't gone wide. But I realized that there's a big community for fantasy in particular over there. And it was obviously only growing because of that big event that just brought a lot of new people to the platform. And then I started to see like author Facebook groups and like books and stuff, like, and people, it was just a lot of like conversation about it. I was starting to write a new series, so I thought, I think I'm going to launch this one on Kickstarter. And it did end up being nearly a year from when I actually wrote the book to when I did the Kickstarter launch, which did give me enough time to kind of prepare for it. And there was a lot of like deep diving. I found that, like, because it's good, but I mean, other genres I've seen people have success with. I found it's particularly good for fantasy, and also it's this big like launch event. I've never had like I never really made a big deal out of launch weeks, and like it's also very physical book focused, and I hadn't really been into that. But then I kind of realized that with epic fantasy, more readers are into like the physical book. I mean, my books aren't super long. I mean, it did end up being the first series that I put into hardcover as well. But I find that in that genre, a lot more readers kind of read in print, and I did consider might do like a relaunch. People were doing like special editions and stuff, but I was like, I don't think I could get the interest. I don't know. But then I would have had existing readers. Like, it was a big risk with a new series because I'd switched genres. So my existing readers, like, I was building up a new audience from scratch, basically, in epic fantasy. And I just then decided to go wide, and then I did Kickstarter. I was like, well, why not just add one other thing? I mean, just new series. I mean, the upside to waiting a year was the fact that I'd seen a lot of other authors do it. So I took loads of notes. I have a whole spreadsheet, like notes on like tiers and like stretch goals and like what sort of thing that they were kind of putting together, whether it was a special edition or just kind of a regular sort of paperback or hardback. I kind of noticed that like there was a lot of emphasis on the print version. I didn't pay for illustrations up front, but I did put the emphasis on it's a hardback. I've never done this before, so it was a bit difficult to find like the selling angle because it's not a special edition. Like, it's not like I could say it's got all these illustrations and like, I don't know, sprayed edges and stuff, because I did it basically print on demand. Kickstarter's audience is mostly in the US, and I was like, are they really going to pay extra for shipping? I mean, they might. Again, it's a case of, will people actually pay for that? Maybe I could have been a bit braver. I was very risk averse with it though. I was like, I'm doing print on demand. I'm signing it on the screen, so I'm not. I could do book plays. I decided not to. Might do that for a future one, but I did it in the way that if it backfired in my face, I would lose the minimum amount of money. I just kind of thought it's a base to build on. Like, each campaign, theoretically, I build my audience over there. Like, I started with, how many followers do I 20, 30 followers or something on my first one. My second one, I had 100 followers. So it's just kind of a gradual build. And it's like, it's almost a brand new audience. Like, some people just browse Kickstarter. They don't shop at retailers. So it's almost like you get 2 launches, or 3 if you're launching direct as well. So that's another thing. It was like, you launch on Kickstarter, you get 1 set of readers. And I did bring some readers over, but I'd say the majority were from Kickstarter, or like from kind of cross-promoting with other authors who were running Kickstarters at the same time. I can't remember. I did break down the percentages, but I don't have the notes in front of me. But I did break down how many people came from Kickstarter, how many came from other places. And there were quite a lot just from the Kickstarter platform. I guess there must just be browsing projects. And then when I launched on Retailer, some people would just wait for that launch. So that's kind of why it's like it's a big event thing, but it's also a new audience as well as the people who want to come and support. And then you have kind of friends and family and people show up as well. So it just makes a bit more of kind of an event of it. And then you also have like a hardback that you can then sell other places.
That's the most fascinating thing I found about Kickstarter is that it seems to be the one platform where discoverability is actually working, which it just blows my mind because, like, as we all know, if you launch on Amazon, if you don't have your promo stack going there, your book basically it disappears off that chart in about 2 seconds. Like, just looking through the Kickstarter website, because I've also got my book to launch in pre-launch right now. I'm also planning to launch it on Kickstarter. It's wild how much priority they give to actually trying to surface new things on Kickstarter. So they have a default sorting method where it's actually random, and so if you use the sort by magic function, which I think is generally the default, you can see in your browser's URL bar, like the random number seed they use to resort all of the projects. And because everything is time limited, you're not competing with the 50 million other books on Amazon. You're just compete. And I say competing loosely because it's really not competing because of all the things that you do with other authors like backer swaps. You're only competing for attention with maybe like 30 other books at the time for those keywords in that particular niche. For me, like where my thinking has moved is I just kind of go, well, I don't see why I wouldn't try and run a Kickstarter for every single new book launch, because if you do print on demand, as Emma's been doing, you can actually work out all your costs up front. You can actually price your tiers in a way that no matter how big or small your funding target, you're actually not going to end up in the red for it. And so it just makes so much sense. Now for Lauren, though, I know you've done not any Kickstarters for your own books, but you've done a couple of anthologies. How has that kind of worked? Because the whole anthology thing is, I look at it and I'm like, that is an amazing project. I have no idea about the kind of work that would go into making something work like that.
Oh God, this is going to be a terrible answer because I have no idea what goes into creating that either. I just wrote the story and sent it, and I did almost nothing with the back end other than sharing the link a few times. But actually listening to you two talk about it, I've never run a Kickstarter, but what you just said about if it funds, you've covered your costs beforehand. I kind of do that with my paperback pre-orders because I do a pre-order on my website, and if it hits a certain threshold, I do extra swag with it, almost like a tier reward or hitting a stretch goal or something to offset, because obviously I have to fund the print run every time, which is a few grand for however many hundreds of books. So I do something similar to that, but I, like Emma, very risk averse, was very afraid of launching a Kickstarter and just watching it crumble into nothing. I felt like if I did it on my own website, people can't see how many books have been pre-ordered. They can't see if I've hit my funding goal. All they see is this lovely picture and the swag that you're going to get, and I can share that almost like it's just a regular product on my website. But that's a nice way to like offset at least some of the costs of the printing. So I've done that, but it's again just shouting about it like in the month leading up. So it's because I have a release date set, so it's going to release whatever happens, and then at least people are like, oh, I want to get a first printing, or I want to get in the first 100 so I can get the swag or whatever. But as far as the anthologies, I only submitted a story, and I don't know what the back end was like. I wasn't involved in picking any of the tiers, so I'm really sorry that I'm the worst person to ask that question.
That's all right. You're busy doing Kickstarter on your own in Hardbird on your own website, which I like. Frankly, I find that amazing because there are and I always look to our peers who are writing and publishing in the romance genres because I feel like they are always at the cutting edge of whatever is happening. I know there are several romance authors who they are not doing Kickstarters, but it's just through the mailing list that they have built over time. They are doing direct pre-orders on their website. I've heard of one, she's getting thousands of books printed on her own, which is amazing. And also an amazing segue into our next segment of selling in person. And I just want everybody to just look at these pictures and appreciate Lauren's entire setup. Like, look at this. Lauren is sitting on a throne of her own books. If that is not author goals, I don't know what is. Like, how do you even get to this point? Because this is just amazing. Like, we've talked about how, you know, with most authors, there's that very risk adverse, like, can I even sell like 10 books, let alone 100 books to start with? My greatest fear of selling direct in person, and the reason why I haven't done any events is, well, number one, I'm in Australia. We have like nothing here. No, that's a lie. We do have events here, but it is not as high profile as any of the events that are in the US and in the UK. So we don't have as many fantasy heavy events. So I think the biggest one is Supernova, which will be happening next month, but I'm not going to that because the stall fees to even get a spot is quite expensive. And then the second reason is I'm awkward enough pitching my book to people online when I can re-record and edit and do different takes and stuff. And I'm just like, well, that was really dumb. I can't do that in person. And so I'm just like, I'm scared of trying to pitch people in person. And then the third reason why I haven't dipped into it is even just trying to figure out how much stock to keep on hand for website orders has been stressing me out. Let alone trying to figure out how many books should I order to take with me to an event where if I get there and I've ordered way too much, what am I going to do with all the leftovers? And if I get there and I haven't ordered enough, what am I going to do when people are just walking past an empty table and I've got nothing?
Yeah.
So I guess for Lauren, can you take us back to where did you start? Because you actually sent me these pictures. On the left-hand side, we have, I think, what is your very first setup. And then on the right-hand side, what you actually do now.
Yeah, so much like publishing my first book, I did not have an idea of what I was doing when I went to my first Comic-Con either. This is becoming a pattern I'm realizing looking back. Like most authors, especially I think women, quite introverted, quite shy. We enjoy writing because we're in our own little worlds and we can take our time and make sure things are perfect before we show them to anybody. I totally understand what you say about, like, it's hard enough to do a sales pitch online, let alone face to face when there's no pause, there's no edit button. So firstly, I would say that actually works in your favor because you don't come across as super confident or arrogant and off-putting. You're a person just like they are, and that showing that humanity can often be quite endearing, as long as you don't put the book down. But you can be like, I'm nervous, and you can be super open and honest about that. And people are, that they're fine with that. So my first event, I took my friend Lucy, who is a school teacher, and she is incredibly confident, has loads of patience, can talk to anybody, can project because, speaking on a mic, you can hear me clearly. Speaking in the room, you probably wouldn't hear me if you're on the other side of my table. So I took her with me, and I think very quickly I realized how I could do it and how I could be successful at it. It's really weird because, I have anxiety. I've had, full-blown panic attacks at Comic-Cons. The sensory overload is crazy. There's noise everywhere. There's loads of moving bodies. There's lights. It's, very intense, which is why I mentioned, like, it can knock me out for like a day or two afterwards, even now. So kind of getting to grips with that, like I take my loop earplugs so I can actually focus on what the person in front of me is saying and not all the conversations there and all the conversations there, and then I don't zone out as much. I'd ordered my 150 books. I'd looked online. I tried to do some research, and a lot of authors were saying, I sell like 10 or 20 books or 50 at most and things like that. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just take 50 copies, and if I sell even 10 copies, I'll be really happy. At least I've tried. I've put myself out there, pushing myself out my comfort zone. And it was a 2-day show. I went to Comic-Con in Exeter, which, if you're familiar with the UK, is like the very, very, very far west of the country. It was a 3-hour drive from where I lived, so I had to take a hotel. So not only am I throwing myself in the deep end with a print run, but also a Comic-Con that I've never done before, that's nowhere near home, that I'm having to pay for a hotel. So basically, if I crashed and burned, I would be very out of pocket. It went really, really, really well. It went so well, in fact, that my other half had to drive on the Saturday night with more books for the Sunday because I'd almost completely sold out. And he drove 3 hours there, dropped them off, gave me a kiss and a cuddle, and then drove back home again the same night. So having support helps. And then how I found it is, it's almost like, imagine all the people there are Amazon shoppers, scrolling through the book, and you're trying to find someone that likes your book. That's kind of how I kind of figured it out. And a lot of the time I let the book do the talking. So I don't really like small talk. If I have a script, and if anyone goes off script, I'm like, I don't know what to say now. I'm going to be really weird, and then they're going to think I'm really awkward and run away. So I'm at a Comic-Con. People there tend to like fantasy. I'm writing dragons, so you have an immediate sort of connection there. So I tend to be, hi, how are you? And then most people walk off, and that's fine. So they're still browsing. And then if they do look over, I'm like, do you enjoy reading fantasy? Do you enjoy epic fantasy with dragons? And if they say yes, I then hand them the book. And pretty much that's all I do, because at that point they've read the back, they're letting the book talk. You don't talk over them, so you don't like bombard them. And then it's very simple. Yes, I like the sound of this, or no, I don't. And that's kind of all I do. Sometimes people will ask questions, like these sorts of questions, like, how long have you been writing for? When did you publish? Where can I buy your books? That kind of thing, which is easy enough to answer. If they go off that script, then I struggle. But I'm a reader as well. I love reading fantasy. They like reading fantasy. So we can then talk about favorite authors who we've read recently, stuff like that. And then they're like, oh, I'm not just reading a blurb on Amazon and deciding. I'm actually speaking to you and getting a feel for who you are, and like if I like the sound of what you're talking about, or if it's not really my cup of tea. And then you kind of like, you build that rapport, and then I don't know, it seems to work really well. It's these are your kindred spirits. And I think when you realize that it becomes a lot less scary. I still do get nervous, even though it's what I do for most of the time. And then when people come back to like the following shows, it's even better. So that was really long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, that's amazing, because the way you've just explained it to me, I think takes a lot of that fear away. Because if you go into it and you realize, actually, you already did like 80% of the work, it sounds like, when you did your cover, your blurb, everything that you're already doing when you're trying to sell on Amazon also applies to when you're trying to sell in person. I think that takes a whole lot of the fear away. And then that extra piece you added in about, well, we're both readers. We both like reading fantasy. Like it helps me make the mental shift from going like, I am like a door-to-door salesman, where I'm just like going, buy my book. And it becomes more of like, we're just readers. We love books, and hey, I happen to have a book, and that helps a lot, I think.
Yeah.
What I want to ask though is, for that first setup that you had at Extra, looking back now and knowing how it had gone and knowing what you've got now with your setup, in your view, what do you think every author who is going to go and do the first event should actually have prepared for their stall?
I think you need to have enough stock, because if you have a table with like 4 books on it, it doesn't look very enticing. If you think about walking past a bookshop window and the display they have in the window, they're never going to have just one book. There'll be a nice stand, maybe some ornaments that are related to make it a bit more eye-catching. Obviously, your cover is still going to look good, but if you can kind of accessorize it almost. So I have like dragon bookends, so I can have a stack of books with the dragon bookends, and it's raised up, so you've got a bit of height, which is eye-catching, and you've got something related. So it could be dragons, it could be a stuffed toy, it could be an ornament, it could be anything like that, just to kind of give it some more warmth. And it's also a bit of your personality and the atmosphere of the book too, so that really helps. You have to have a really nice tablecloth. If you have something like with your author logo or a banner or just your book covers or something, so you're catching attention, that's good, because at Comic-Con they can get really busy and there's like 1,001 distractions. So if you can give them like a focal point visually, that will help. And then if you have like a lot of books, it looks like you're quite successful, so that also helps. And then what I would suggest is having something that people can take away if they don't buy, so like a business card or something with a QR code, people are, oh, I've spent all the money for the day or something like that, but they can look you up after. And then having something that they can buy that's not a book and that has a lower price point. So a lot of people are, I really like this, but I can't afford a full book right now. So maybe it's some bookmarks or stickers or some other swag that they can still get, with your details on it, so they can look it up later. Because the amount of times people would really like talking to me but not really be interested in the books, but want to do something, give them an option to do that. I did for a long time, up until COVID, I did a lucky dip box. So I just got like an old shoebox and cut a hole in it, and I put some, I think it was like Chupa Chups lollies. I don't know if you have them in Australia, but just like little lollies for like kids, really cheap. You can buy a bag of like 1,000 for not very much. And I put like a little raffle ticket on. So it was like £1 to go. You have fun, you reach into the lucky dip, and then if you won got the lolly with the raffle ticket, you won like a dragon puppet I had, but you could have anything that's kind of vaguely familiar that isn't the book necessarily. And then you've got lots of kids getting involved, they get something. And then you have a lot of people spending money with you that aren't buying books, but then they're still able to support you even if they don't take a physical book away. And having those two options really, really helps, I think. So something free they can take away, something low price for you and them, and then having lots of books there so they look really good. And also, if you have more than one book, doing some kind of price bundle so to promote the upselling for the selling marketing brain.
Have you found for that audience, do ebooks or audiobooks or digital stuff of any kind work with that audience? Because I can imagine that at an event where it's so heavily focused on the physical and the tangible, like I probably couldn't sell a hardback for less than $25 just with the margins with print on demand. But yeah, I could have like a little QR code with like a book funnel link for an ebook or something like that. That's
absolutely doable. Yes. So I took my ebooks out of KU in October, November, and my audiobooks are also wide. Both of those are on my website as well. So I started to do not even ebook only. I started to do, I call them pages and play. So you buy the pages, the physical book, and you get the audio, the play bit of it as a little bundle. So you know how Amazon has WhisperSync. If you own the ebook, you get the audio at like half price or whatever the discount is. But basically the same thing. So if you buy the physical book, you can get the audio for a discounted price. I still need to kind of refine it, but I basically would take the email address so I can book funnel it there and then, so I have like a tablet. But I also would give them a physical card so they can actually do that as well with a link. So I started doing that end of last year, and that's been really, really popular, because if someone's like already, yes, I'll buy the book, and then you say, oh, do you listen to audiobooks at all? And they say, yeah, but like, do you want to do the little bundle as well? And it's a cute little bundle, and it's a price, and you get this and this, and because you're getting more than one book, you get a sticker as well. And they're like, yeah, I'll do that. And so the audio paperback bundles have been really, really popular. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do the ebook, because the thing is with my setup, because I have so many books, decision paralysis can become a problem. So I have like 3 bundles of physical books, so like the first 2, all 4, and everything on the table, which works. And then you start adding like an audiobook bundle or ebooks as well. That can become a bit difficult. And sometimes what I've found is I'm trying to get the conversation so it's easy for them to say, yes, I like an ebook, because like Emma, you're always tweaking your website. Like at Comic-Cons, I'm always kind of like tweaking my pitch and how I approach things. So you want things to be really simple for the customer. You know how, one-click purchase on Amazon is really useful because it's so convenient. It's the same kind of thing. If the more options you offer, even though you think you're being helpful, can sometimes be really detrimental to them. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to push ebooks as well, because obviously lower price point, in a way that doesn't take away from the physical and doesn't override the choices. So yes, definitely something I'm doing. It's starting to take off. It just needs to be refined a bit.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you tend to find a different audience coming through every year? So I think with most events that I've seen, they run on sort of a regular annual basis is what's most common. Have you found if you go to an event year after year, you start building a sort of audience that goes to those events, or do you see people year on year coming back?
Yeah, I do. And it's really weird when they come back. Like, I saw you 2 years ago. Have you got another book out and stuff like that? That's really awesome. Or I'll get, in the run up to event, I'll get a load of DMs saying, are you going to be there? And where's your table going to be? And things like that. So I say weird, but like a really good weird. Like it still blows my mind. I think at events, you always take more of book 1 than the sequels, because the majority will be new people, just because either events are so big you didn't get to see them before, or they're just trying out for the first time. But there are a good, I would say, 20 to 25% return customers for the same event year on year. If I could write faster, I'd probably get more of them. But yeah, the majority will be new people buying the first book, and then it will be people coming back for the sequels. yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, if they like your book, obviously they'll come back. If they don't, you won't ever see them again. So yeah, it's been really, really good. They do become fans and friends, and like a couple of them are like on my beta reader team now and stuff. So it's like, I think meeting the author is quite a special thing, which I kind of take for granted because I am the author. But for some people, like buying a signed book direct from you and getting to talk to you and having a photo with you is a real highlight for them, especially at an event where there aren't too many authors, because it's quite it's a bit of a novel thing, excusing the pun. So that they've made that connection, so they do come back year on year. It's just really awkward for me when I go face blind and I'm like, I don't know who you are, but thank you. Sure, we did talk, but I don't know who you are.
That is so awesome. And then I think the last question I want to cover with in-person sales is, what are some of the biggest mistakes you tend to see authors who are new to selling in person make?
I think it's not talking to people, not engaging, and letting that fear override you. A lot of Comic-Cons, you have tables where there's, big reams of Funko Pops and ornaments and illustrations. So it's very easy for people to come up and be like, yes, I like the look of that. Yes, I like the look of that. There's no real engagement. They are literally just a seller dealing with the money. If you're selling your books, people will be like, I've never heard of it. Where is this from? Or what's the film from? And, they don't know what it is. So you do have to put in a little bit of effort. You can't really just sit back and hope someone will come to you. You will get that, of course, people who are curious. But if people are kind of looking as they're walking past and slowing down, and then you, the author, don't say anything to engage them, even as simple like good morning, or are you having a nice time at the con, or would you like to have a look, you're losing out massively on sales. And I see that all of the time with authors that are trying cons for the first time. Like, I know it's nerve-wracking and I know it's a bit awkward. Lean into that and just be like, I've never done this before, but this is my first book. Do you want to have a look? And like, you kind of just be yourself. Don't feel like you need to be super professional. You're not in sales in that way. That's not your job. Your job is to be creative and just make that connection. So by far the biggest mistake is not engaging or just sitting down and not really doing anything. Like, stand up, catch people's eye, just be friendly. And like, if you're a bit nervous, lean into that, because people are going to find that more endearing than off-putting, because most of the time they're nervous too.
That makes so much sense. All right, we are probably going to jump back to talking about the e-stores, which I personally think a web store, if you haven't done any form of selling direct, this one's probably the easiest one to get up and going. So this is a little peek at what all of our different e-stores look like at the moment. I think what might help here is just covering briefly, what can readers buy from your shop and what kind of tech solutions and providers are you using to actually make the storefront and handle payment processing, and then how do you actually get the books out?
Basically anything they can get from a retailer, and some extras like exclusives. So it's ebooks, paperbacks, some audiobooks. I don't have a ton of books in audio, and a couple of the series that I do have in audio are with publishers at the moment, so I can't sell those, but everything that I am allowed to sell on the store is there. One of the things I am tweaking is like bundles and that sort of thing. Like, I've been doing ebook bundles, but I'm gradually kind of adding more of them. So some series have like the full series box set, which is non-retailers. So there's one series which is 7 books, and because Amazon has like a price cap with the royalty payments, so you can't charge more than $9.99 US for an ebook without getting the royalty cut from 70% to 35%. Some other retailers don't have that requirement, but that does kind of put a limit on how many books you can sell in a bundle, unless you're in Kindle Unlimited. Like, some authors will sell it cheap and then get the page rates. I don't have that, so instead I sell the bundles on the store, and it's an exclusive. Like, they can still get the individual books as well, but the bundle has a discount on it. You can also do paperback bundles as well, like Book Vault, which is it's print on demand, and it's like an extension. It's like synced to my Shopify store, so it's kind of like Ingram, except it's based in the UK, and it has like integration with Shopify and WooCommerce and some of the others, and you can sell paperbacks that way, and it's basically print on demand, so I don't have to do anything. If people order a print book, it's printed and shipped straight to them. I just have to have the account set up and everything. They're always introducing new features, and recently they introduced the ability to bundle print books that you already have up together. So I've been kind of experimenting with that, with get like the full series as a bundle, and it's like a separate product, but I don't actually have to set it up. Like, I don't have to do a ton of setup, just make a graphic with the image, and then the pricing and stuff is maybe I'll put a bit of a discount on the individual books. Again, that's another thing I'm experimenting with. It's like I can discount it. It's also, I think the margins are better than Ingram, I think, what I remember, possibly because there's no like discount. Like with Ingram, if you discount it so that bookstores can order it, you don't get much in the way of profit. With BookVault, because I'm just using it to sell direct, it means that technically I can price lower and still get a higher royalty percentage than from other retailers. So that's quite handy. As far as tech support goes for ebooks and audio, I use BookFunnel, which is amazing. I could not live without BookFunnel. It's, as well as selling direct, you can also use it to like distribute like reader magnets and like advanced reader copies and like do like cross promotions and that sort of thing. So I have a subscription to that, and that kind of covers everything that I need it for. I was already using it for mailing list, like reader magnet distribution and that sort of thing. So just to add selling direct didn't require too much. And then they handle the tech support. So if people can't download the ebook file, I can't do anything about that. I don't know what e-reader they've got. So send them to BookFunnel. They've got like a need help button on the download page. So when they buy an ebook, they get sent the link from BookFunnel. And also I kind of put the link in like the thank you for your order kind of confirmation emails. And then also if they get their books on BookFunnel, if you have a BookFunnel account, everything that you bought from or downloaded from an author's store should be in there, so you can read it. They have a free app that you can read on any device really, and you can also like transfer it to your e-reader. So I think having that option, like there's when you download a book from BookFunnel, it comes up with all these options: send to Kindle, send to whatever e-reader you might have. So I think just making it as user friendly as possible and having them handle the tech support takes away perhaps a lot of the kind of hesitation some readers might have to buying direct. I can't imagine like sending out EPUBs by myself. I've done that with ARCs before, like with review copies when in the beginning when that wasn't, and like converting the files myself. But honestly, as soon as BookFunnel came along, I was like, where have you been all my author career? Like I cannot live without it. And they do audiobooks too. You can download like an MP3 or listen in the app. I mean, I still use a Kindle, but again, and I assume most of my readers do, but it's just the fact that you can send the file there with like maybe one extra step. Like you can't have Kindle one click. That's just not something you can replicate on your own store. But just to make it as seamless and as like close to that experience as possible. And then knowing that making sure like readers know that and know how it all works. So I have like on my book pages, I have how to download your ebook file and like what to do if the email goes to spam, because that can happen, and stuff like that, just kind of troubleshooting potential issues really. And then I kind of have the shop chat so people can contact me if they can't get their files and stuff, but usually BookFunnel can handle that sort of thing. And then with the paperbacks, like BookVault will send them like a tracking emails, so you can kind of tell when your package is going to be delivered and stuff like that. And I had test run it myself before setting it up, but I've not had the courage to like sell signed copies that I ship out myself. I think just trying to calculate the postage cost would have been a bit of a barrier to that. But BookVault, obviously they have Royal Mail and like some others. They have a US printer now too. That's also a new thing they've introduced. So there's more reasonable kind of shipping rates, and you can kind of see how much you're paying for it up front. It's not the same as Prime free shipping, but it's kind of unavoidable. There's some things you can't replicate, but just making it as user friendly as possible and being like upfront with all the policies and stuff like that, I think helps kind of break down like the resistance some people might have towards the process. Yeah, so that's how
I think really having the page there is a big thing, and I like it's the question of the readers who want to buy direct from you are probably not going to email you or DM you and say, hey, I would like to buy direct from you. Like I've had that happen like maybe one time ever in a Discord, and they would not have said a thing to me if I hadn't happened to be in the Discord talking about something else. But what I have had, especially for my kids' books, is out of the blue, I wake up and I log into my email and it's like, somebody just ordered 10 books from you. Like that actually happens. It's not just a one-off. It happens regularly enough that I always sit here and I wonder, like, what if I had talked myself out of tackling all the tech setup? I wouldn't have gotten all those sales. The thing that I think makes it easier to kind of take that step in, if you're not doing a print run of your own like Lauren is, with Ingram Spark, with BookVault, with Amazon KDP even, you can get them to kind of handle the shipping by drop shipping it to the readers. What I basically do with my website is they have the storefront. It's not integrated at the moment. I've got to look into that BookVault integration because it sounds amazing. But essentially somebody will put an order through my WooCommerce website, and then I get the order in my inbox, and I physically then go log into Amazon or Ingram, and I will order an author copy to get sent to them. Unless they're doing signed copies, in which case I do have to keep a small bundle of stock just to do those. But by and large, the biggest hurdle, I think, is figuring out how to price that shipping. And because you can't compete with Amazon or any of those places on their shipping prices, you kind of have to build the buffer for what you end up paying in shipping into your prices. At least that's how I do it. The thing I find a lot of authors overlook is that even if you are in KU, you can still have a direct store. You can still sell your print copies. And I think these days, especially when Ingram Spark's taken away their title setup fees and revisions fees for the first 60 days, it makes sense to have some sort of print version of your book, so at least you can offer it. The next question I want to ask you guys is, how do you get them to switch from buying at a retailer to buying from you first and foremost?
With difficulty. It was a bit of a hurdle to start off with. I think for me, the first month, I made $1. So yeah, but that's because like I said the store was open, but at the time I already had like a free book that was free on the retailers. So I also made it free on my store. So I did that as like a try it out. If you don't already own this book, you can buy a copy. I was hoping people would pay for books as well, but a lot of people bought the free book like to test as a test run, and just to test the process. I did point out that like I'd been giving away my reader magnets through Book Funnel the whole time, like basically as long as it's been available, so they know the process. And then a couple of months after that, I set up the first exclusive bundle, so the complete series. It was my most popular series. It was 7 books, and that bundle was available nowhere else. And I had a bit more luck with that. So giving them something that they can't get on the retailer. And also I offered like a coupon. I think it was like Christmas. So it was like percentage off for like the holiday season kind of thing. And I've had some luck with like coupons just for my newsletter and stuff like that. With one series, it was the first series that I indie published. I was like, it's the 8-year anniversary of publishing. You can get a discount on this, and then I just set up. It's quite easy to set up coupons with Shopify, so it's like percentage or like buy one get one half price or something like that. There's a lot of options there. I've really not dug into it. Like, there's so many options. Like, I was just dabbling with like the bare minimum, but I did find it's helpful kind of to have something that like makes them feel like they can get something that they can't get anywhere else. And also because it's by mailing list, they're getting something that isn't like publicly available. I think the major shift really was Kickstarter, and that was about 6 months after I set the store up. I think the Kickstarter was perhaps, even though it required a bit more explaining up front, it was the fact that it was like exclusive and it was a new release. So maybe if I'd done an exclusive new release on my store, then that would have been persuasive. But it's kind of it was like to add the exclusivity, it was like an either or sort of thing, like to make it more worthwhile for people who backed the Kickstarter event, that I had to then delay the store launch. So I had this like staggered kind of launch. So I did the Kickstarter fulfillment, then the store and Patreon backers got it early as well, and then retailers last. And some people will still wait and buy from Amazon, but the store, I guess, is for people who want to add like the direct support. I do think that, I don't know what I'll do if I go back to urban fantasy at any point, whether I do Kickstarter for that. With epic fantasy, I'm kind of committed to doing Kickstarter first almost, so that makes it a bit difficult. But I think some of the appeal is the like kind of getting something first early or like at a discount. Like I kind of thought of maybe kind of offering it early, like $1 cheaper or something on the store. Didn't end up doing that, but just because there's so many options, I think, with the store, like it was almost kind of overwhelming. Like the setup took so much out of me. I didn't think, apart from just put a free book on there, teach people how to use it, and then I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna do this bundle now, and then and that was quite helpful. And I've been gradually doing that with some other backlist series as well, because a lot of them don't have full series bundles, especially the ones that are like more than 3 books, because then it's just not really like pricing on retailers. It's just difficult. So yeah, that's kind of how I've gone about it.
Similar sort of thoughts for me. The exclusivity is a real big one. I do self-distribute as well, so I can sell signed personalized books that are directly in the book, my paperbacks physically aren't available anywhere else except the Broken Binding stocks them, but it's not going to be personalized. And then I also include things like bookmarks as well that you can't get anywhere else and things like that. So that that definitely helps. Like Emma, also some special bundles, discounted bundles and things like that help. And now that I've got the ebooks and the audiobooks, I can do different bundle formats, so you can get all formats for a particular book, and this is the saving that you get. I also do monthly discounts with my newsletter. So now that I've got kind of a few books in a few different formats, I kind of have enough to do a different monthly discount throughout the year. So it might be book one of this series, it might be all paperbacks, it might be this audiobook, it might be this new bundle, so there's an extra saving on it. And like I have enough stock or SKUs really to kind of do that, which really helps. It's also incentivizing people to sign up to my newsletter. So I'm very much tweaking constantly, doing different discounts. My patrons get a 15% discount on my website too. I'm very aware that some people will just always go to Amazon. It's their comfort zone. It's familiar. It's easy. So I also price things. I say prices on my website are lower, so rather than saying like the price is hiked on Amazon. So if people do want to buy through their preferred retailer that isn't me, that's entirely up to them. And then obviously because Amazon take a bigger royalty, I then make a bit more if the book itself is a bit more, so it's not too bad. So whether people go there or to me, I'm kind of getting the best in terms of royalty, and they're getting the best in terms of the price they want or the comfort or the familiarity that they want. But yeah, I think it's the main draw really is that exclusivity, because we can change our prices, covers, bundles, promos in whatever way we want, and it's instant. Whereas, change a price on Amazon, maybe 2 days later it'll update. So just leaning into that real control and being able to experiment and test and change is kind of where the push to direct comes from for me.
Honestly, the thing that blew my mind about direct was we don't talk about this often because mostly I think authors are focused on that sales dashboard and whether or not those numbers are actually going up or the page reads and whatever. But it blew my mind when I was looking at receipts coming into my bank account, right? And I think I got the Amazon payout. I don't know, like they pay terribly. It's like 45 days or something. And then the Ingram Spark ones are coming 60 to 90 days after you've actually made the sale, wherever it may be. And in that month, that was the month when somebody had ordered 10 books from me. They just found me. And I got the money in my account the next day.
Yeah.
It was not only did I get the money in my bank account the next day, I kept something like 90% of it because I didn't have to pay Ingram's cut. I didn't have to pay Amazon's stupid download fees. The only fee I really paid was I think it was 1.2% on payment processing that Square takes on credit cards and things like that. And the WooCommerce plugin that I use for my WordPress site, it's free. You don't have to actually pay any sort of monthly fee to use it. And so all it really cost me in terms of the overheads of selling direct through the website it's so low because it's basically incidental to the cost of actually having an author website. And once you've got it there, it just made sense to me to add that extra page. So I'm really excited about getting deeper into selling direct because when you go into it, like Emma said, there's so many strategies, there's so many things you can do. I've seen some authors do some very sophisticated things with they integrate it into their newsletter. And so they have this incredible funnel that goes from the reader magnet that's everywhere, that funnels you into their newsletter, that then takes you through an onboarding sequence. And then you've got the monthly, I don't even know what you call it. It's the user flows that if you've got a massive backlog like Emma does, you can actually feed them the different books and the cross sells. And it's a really amazing world out there in direct. And so when I kind of step back and think about it all, there's just so much you can do when it comes to selling direct that we've really barely managed to scratch the surface here. And as somebody who's right at the beginning of that journey, it's so super overwhelming that I want to bring it back to the high level. What do you think it takes to succeed in selling direct?
Patience and an openness to adaptability. What works one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year may not the next. So like looking at it as a long-term game and having patience for that, and then just kind of pivoting as necessary. And as soon as you learn something new, I think they're more likely to get you success, I think.
Yeah, I pretty much patience. Yeah. It's like publishing in general, really, I think, but added kind of because it's very, very, very slow. $1 in my first month selling direct, and then it's built, and now it's a lot steadier and it's a lot more consistent, and it feels steadier than like retailers, like even though it's not, like it's kind of an illusion, but at the same time, because you can get like better margins on like a much lower number of sales, and then you get the money right away, and there's no kind of guessing, like even with Amazon, even when you're not exclusive, when you are exclusive, it's playing guessing games with page reads. Having access to all that data and stuff, it is overwhelming, but also patience, just time. The other thing with Kickstarter in particular, I think kind of the community aspect and like collaboration and stuff were kind of important, like just kind of, working together with other authors. It's not like you're competing for one spot on the bestsellers lists. Like I got so much out of Kickstarter because of that aspect of it, of the kind of cross promotion and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the differences between kind of selling direct and retailers. It doesn't feel so like cutthroat. It feels like you get it, you're doing something special for readers and they get to be a part of it, and it's not, you kind of collaborating with other authors as well. So yeah. And
that's really what I found to be true. I think, I don't know, and I've never tried querying. I've never gone into the trad publishing world, but just sitting on the sidelines watching my friends who are going through that, I get it's a very cutthroat vibe. I feel like it feels like there's only so many agents, there's only so many editors, there's only so many slots in a trad pub's house slate for who can get published, whereas the indie world is so much more welcoming. And I've really found that the most valuable connections I've made in the indie world are with other authors like you guys, where we're just sharing our experiences and sharing the lessons that we've learned. And on that note, this is my favorite question to ask anybody who has been self-publishing for a while. Let's say you had to start over with a brand new pen name that's unconnected to anything you've built before. What, if anything, would you do differently? And, especially when it comes to selling direct.
I mean, I've never started, well, I have started with the pen name, but when I started in epic fantasy, it felt like starting over. And the way I did that with my second series was that I went to Kickstarter first and then did the retailers and direct. So I think I would use that approach again, like the way that I did it. But I mean, the way I launched my first epic fantasy series straight into KU, I would not do it that way again. I think I would start with Kickstarter. I think as a debut, like I never had like the kind of it's my first novel kind of thing as part of the story, but I feel like that can be a selling angle, and I think it is a good way to start out. Like it's low risk if you don't do it like a high risk special edition kind of thing, and also it's a good way to get like a kind of get started in publishing. So I think I would start out that way. If I was willing to learn all of it. I'm not entirely sure on that one. But now, knowing how it is now, there's a lot more information out there. I don't think there was when I first started, so that also plays into it. But yeah, if I was starting today, it's totally different to when I did start, which, I mean, 9 years. I keep forgetting what year it is. 2015 was when I indie published for the first time. And I feel like everything has changed since then. Everything that I've had to learn has changed. Like the basics are the same, but I mean, Kindle Unlimited was a thing at the time, but I think it was that year that it switched over to the page read system. So even that wasn't there when I first started out. So knowing what I know now, yeah, it's about as close as you can get to starting from scratch, really going into a new genre when there's not a ton of crossover. But yes, that's how I'd do it, I think.
I don't know if I could speak for anyone else, but I would just say kind of like being brave and going for it sooner. Like I was so focused on getting all my ducks in a row and making sure I understood everything before I even took that first step. I would say like you don't need to necessarily have everything figured out. You can just start and you can just go and you can kind of learn as you go and adapt as you go. It certainly stopped me from publishing a lot sooner than I would have otherwise, because I had the book ready for a while before I did anything with it. Just go for it. Just try it. Like nothing is irrevocable. Everything can be changed. Even if the book flops, you can pull it, redo your strat, new covers and everything. That can all be fixed, and you won't know if you even need to do that or if it's going to be a success until you actually take that first step. What I mean by that is like you don't need to worry about setting up the perfect website with the perfect design, with the perfect, like just just do it so people can find you. And, you know, what's the phrase? Build it and they will come. That is what I would definitely say is a mentality to have. Just go for it, and then you will very quickly know what you don't know, and you get that community around you much sooner, and you're less alone for longer. It can be daunting, yes, but it can be really, really positive and rewarding, and you don't know until you actually take the plunge. So just be braver earlier.
Fantastic. And with that, we are going to flip over to having a look at our audience questions. So question number 1, do you all like ducks?
That's quite random. I don't dislike ducks.
Pretty much. Ducklings are cute.
Yeah.
Ducklings are very cute. I think the cutest duck-related thing I've seen was, and I was particularly to this because I am in Australia, and I made the conscious decision to write in US English, knowing that most of my readers would be US based. And I can't remember who it was, but there was another Aussie New Zealand author, and in their forward they had an explanation about Kiwi Aussie English, and they said, I know you Americans must be missing your Z, so here's a whole series of them. Look, here's a capital one, here's some tiny ones, and don't they look like a mummy duck and a duckling? It's like the cutest forward.
That's brilliant.
Okay, we might skip over the second question about our favorite food to make. We'll save that for a later one. But we have a question here which says, what is the hardest part you found about publishing your books?
It's hard because it changes for me with every book. I would say probably just being vulnerable in the first instance is something that I always struggle to get over. Like, I think it's good. Do you think it's good? Like you were saying earlier, you were going to actually pay me some of your money that you've earned for my story. Like, are you sure you want to do that? And kind of like getting over that self-doubt, because I think we can be our own worst critics, and that I don't think will ever go away. It's quite a tricky obstacle, and it's part of every book that I publish that I have to kind of deal with and get over.
Yeah, the nerves do not get any. And I always feel like it got worse when I did Kickstarter, just because it's so public. I mean, I'm glad that I did it, but the first time I did it, I was like, this is like publishing for the first time again. and because gradually it doesn't get easier, but like you kind of get used to the process, and then it's almost like when you try something new, it's like this could go wrong in 100 ways and everyone can see me, and I kind of want to hide under my desk, but you have to put yourself out there. And I suppose at least they can't see me hiding under my desk, so that's all right. But
I think for me it has been that it just I don't know that I could say it gets easier. It just seems like the longer I do it and the more things I try, the more it seems that I don't know. So it's like when I first started, I thought writing the book was going to be hard. And then I actually hit publish and I was like, no, actually getting people to buy the book is a hard thing. And then I realized I didn't know how to pitch my books. And then once I kind of sort of figured out how to pitch a book in a way that would make people interested, I went, oh, I don't actually know how to generate traffic to go to my book page so people can see the lovely pitch I put together. And it's just with every new thing I learned, I'm just like, oh God, it's just opened up a whole new horizon that I didn't even know existed. And so that's part of why I'm doing a lot of these panels, because there's just so much to learn out there. All of the mistakes that you will run into as a self-published author, and you will run into them, you will learn from. But it is a whole lot easier to learn from other people who've already made the mistake and they can tell you what not to do. The next question is, if you have sold at a convention before, what was your first one like compared to your last one? And have you learned anything interesting?
I've learned a lot, definitely a lot. Yeah, I guess the interesting thing, much like publishing, it never gets easier in terms of the nerves, at least to begin with, until you find your stride somewhat. I think in terms of like how it compares, they're busier than they used to be. Selling more books is, as in like books 1, 2, 3, 4, is sometimes harder than selling just one book, which I didn't realize would be a thing until I actually had a sequel or two. Like every single event, I try and find something that I can take to the next one, like whether it's tweaking the table display, like you would tweak a website, or pricing bundles, or new formats, or just different ways to engage with people. It's a constant learning, but yeah, I do more of them now than I thought I would, I guess, as well.
How many do you do a year, out of curiosity?
It varies year to year, between 6 and 10. Like we were saying earlier, doing them takes away from writing time as well. So there was a point where I was like, yeah, let's do as many as possible, 2, 3 a month. But then I wouldn't write for so long. So now it's around 8 is what I average. Some years more or less, depending on if I have a new release or something that requires more time.
Emma, what about you? Are you thinking of going to cons? Do you already do cons?
No, so the closest I've come to selling at a convention, and this was like 2016, there was a fantasy like convention that I went to, and they had like an indie book stall, so you could kind of sell your books there, but like I wouldn't be the one actually selling them. Like they would so you could bring a few copies, and then they would sell them and then give you the money afterwards. And so that's kind of the closest I've come to that. And that was quite good because I think I've also done a group signing that wasn't really a convention, and that turned out to be mostly other authors. So the lesson I learned from that one is that it helps if it's like an event that's focused on my genre, because the convention was fantasy sci-fi focused. The interesting thing about that was that the books that actually sold copies were not the ones that sold on retailers. The ones that normally sell in ebook didn't sell a single copy in print. The ones that people bought were actually the ones that don't sell as well on retailers. So clearly it's a different audience. So I thought that was an interesting takeaway from that. I was really surprised. I was like, well, I mean, they all got nice covers, but some books, I guess, do better on retailers to that audience than people browsing at a convention. And I may be doing a bit of dabbling later this year, so we shall see how that goes. I feel like I should rewatch and take some notes from what Lauren was saying, because it's very handy. And like I said, that was 8 years ago, so it's like I'm not remotely on top of what's going on now.
I'm very nervous because I decided not to do Supernova. So I had such a fail in 2023, because 2023 was the year that I had promised the sequel, and then of course did not deliver the sequel, because the sequel went from being 120,000 words to 220 something thousand words right now. And so I did not make my deadline. And so for 2024, I said, I'm setting 2 goals. 1, I'm going to publish the freaking sequel. And 2, I want to do a convention. I want to try this selling person thing. But like the thing that was in my head was like, what am I going to do if I just show up with like 1 book? I have 1 book. Is that even worth it? And so I really wanted to try a convention when I had at least 2 books to sell, which means I'm not doing Supernova in June. But Book Fair Australia it's a much smaller event that's at the same venue. That's happening in November this year. So fingers crossed, I will let you guys know how that goes. And I will probably try and organize another author panel just to dive deeper into all the selling in person at a convention stuff. And we shall see how that goes. All right. The next question is, wouldn't direct sales mean fewer sales and reviews on Amazon and lower algo rankings? Deborah said she started low on Amazon anyway, but advertising can improve it. So I'll answer this first, and then we'll throw to our panelists. For me, the thing with me is, right, like I probably did everything about my launch completely wrong. And a lot of it is, one, a holdover from the fact that I started out with bilingual picture books. And so I was just like, there's not that many of them on Amazon anyway. So at least when I started, there were maybe like 4 titles out there. And so most of my sales and launch and all that momentum, it came from Facebook groups of parents, of that language, trying to pass that language down to their children. And a lot of it is Facebook and Instagram. That's honestly where a lot of my traffic comes from. What I found is, if you're not posting, you're not getting the views, and if you're not getting the views, you don't get the click-throughs or the conversion or whatever over to the storefront. I never I think I played with Amazon ads for maybe like 1 week, and it wasn't like I expected to actually get sales out of it. It's just more like, let's learn how this platform works and what all the keywords are about. And I think I spent like $5 obviously, which does nothing, right? Because $5 over a week is like 1 click on each listing, and you've got to, I don't know what is the number, guys? Like I think it's like $20 or whatever it is. It's insanely high now. And so I've never actually gone into ads or promos or any of that, because for me, I just kind of sat here and went, one, I just don't have enough books out to make the ROI on ads worth it. And so right now I'm just sitting here trying to get as many books out as I can as possible, while making sure that the books are, actually still fit for consumption. So that's basically where I've been at. What about you guys?
I think, to be honest, I mean, I went wide when my fantasy books weren't ranking well on Amazon anyway, so I had nothing to lose at that point. And like the page reads were dwindling, because I find that with Amazon, what tends to happen is that certain books sell and then they keep selling. And then if you're not selling, you might as well like try to fly, like for all the amount of effort that it takes to push books. Because I've tried it, there's certain series that just will not move no matter how much I throw at ads. And I realized that with that whole name, it was just sinking, and then almost getting to start over with other retailers. I wasn't losing out because there was no visibility anyway. So I was like, they're not giving me any visibility. So I will, yeah. And then I didn't start. I am doing ads, Facebook ads to my store now. I don't do Amazon ads of that name. I've never had a profitable Amazon ad that I've run myself in my life. Like I cannot, like, even when I can make sense of the platform, for whatever reason, I just can't get it to work. It doesn't help that my fantasy series is shorter. So like they're mostly trilogies or like 4 books, and that's kind of hard with the ROI, especially if you're charging like cheap ebooks and that sort of thing. In my longest urban fantasy series is 7 books, and even that I struggled. So, but yeah, the way I do it is I just do the ads to the store, and then the store has the link to Amazon, and some people will go and buy from there. But otherwise, I don't even look at the rank anymore. I used to be obsessive over it when I was first publishing. It's not a healthy place to be, because it's just not something that's within control. Again, it's that cutthroat kind of competitive, intense difficulty, just chasing an algorithm. It's just not. It's a losing game. Like it's not something you can understand how it works really. It's that name Amazon has decided they don't like it anymore. So, and I did not help when I took my books wide. So. Like, I can't even rely on them to like send an email to my Amazon followers when I have a new book out. And I know they don't, because I follow my own author page and I don't get those alerts. So I'm quite cynical about Amazon these days. And especially, yeah, so it's like, yeah, I don't, I can't remember the last time I even checked the rank, to be honest.
That's fair. It's funny, when I unchecked auto renew on KDP Select, I had the biggest page reads month of my entire author career, and I was like, I wonder if Amazon's pushing it to be like, look, you don't want to leave us, you want to stay in KU, don't you? And I would put money on like something in the algorithm is like, if you're coming out of KU, we'll give it a little push. I don't run ads at all. I did a couple maybe 2 or 3 years ago, just to try and like figure it out. Like, I'd done some author courses and I'm like, oh yeah, that seems straightforward, I know what I'm doing. But genuinely, I don't think my books are mainstream enough to get the traction. I think, not that I write something niche, but I just write, slightly off center to what most people, if you think of like classic epic fantasy, is, which is fine. So I don't think ads would ever really work for me. So if I get fewer sales on Amazon, it doesn't bother me too much, because it's not my biggest pot for revenue. It's nice to have. Obviously, I'm not going to say no to Amazon sales, but my focus and my priority is so much on direct that Amazon is just like a bonus. Like, I check my Goodreads reviews more than I check my Amazon reviews. So, and word of mouth is the biggest sell anyway. So it's just another retailer to me at this point. So fewer verified reviews doesn't bother me. Like you're saying, is Amazon will either push you or it won't. And not being exclusively on there doesn't really affect that too much, unless you're one of the big hitters, in my experience. So it's not a concern I have, really.
Yeah, this might be I don't know how well founded this take is, right? Because I have not been published long enough, and I therefore don't actually have the review and rating numbers to say otherwise, if there is really that mythical push that you get past a certain cutoff of reviews and whatever. But I have like no reviews on my kids' books, right? Like there's I think the first one has like maybe 3 ratings on Amazon. There's like 1 like very generic comment on it, and there's also like a 1-star rating on there because I don't know, didn't leave a comment, so I have no idea why they 1-starred it. But that first book still continues to sell. It sells with, like, I have not done anything on my kids' books for, well, let's see, the past 2 years, because revisions have been kicking my butt on the fantasy novel. But from the reels and the Instagram posts and the things that I did before publishing the fantasy novel, I still get sales on that book automatically. People are still finding it. I'm not sure how they're finding it because I'm not posting. Sometimes it is, I can see on the social media dashboards that it's because Instagram started pushing a reel for whatever reason, or it's because somebody's like viewed a couple of videos on my YouTube channel. But more likely than not, I think it's just when you're writing in a niche that is underserved, if your book actually meets what those readers want in that niche, they will go find it, and reviews and ratings are not necessarily as big of a factor there. It's a lot harder for my fantasy novels, one, because I don't write anything like what most people think of when they think fantasy. And so I have found the fantasy novel to be a lot harder to pitch to people just because there's also so much more competition out there. But the kids' books, it's like the thing that, oh, by the way, don't start 2 pen names if you don't already have a backlog like Emma does. I would not advise that. That was a terrible decision that I made. But the kids' books are something where I know intellectually that if I put more marketing effort behind it, I would do a lot better. I could probably do the offset print runs in like 300, 500. I could get, distribution through indie specialist bookstores, that kind of thing. It's just something that I've not prioritized. I probably really should, except I can't because there's only one of me to do all the things. The last question before the fun question is Kit asks, no selling exclusively direct, right? Slide loading EPUB files into Kindle can be a pain to some people. So I think we've already covered that one to some extent with BookFunnel. I think you both use BookFunnel, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. There are some alternatives to BookFunnel out there. So there is Story Origin, which I have tried out before. I don't think Story Origin does audiobooks, though. I think, or maybe you have to pay for that feature. What I'm currently using right now is WooCommerce does have a built-in feature to let you kind of automate the delivery of files. I don't know how well that works, honestly, because I haven't been selling long enough to get enough traffic to have a good set of data points for that. But as far as that kind of works is you basically upload and you host the file on your own website. And then when they do the WooCommerce checkout process, you get the invoice and the download link is on the invoice. But I think when I get to a point where I can afford the monthly fee on the BookFunnel, I will probably switch to the BookFunnel, because with the WooCommerce, you are having to write your own tech help instructions on how to load all the things. And it's not hard to do, but it's just one more thing to do on top of the 5 million other things that you've got to do.
Yeah.
So our last audience question, what is your favorite food to make/bake?
Emma, feel free. My brain is going.
I don't bake anymore. Like, very rarely. Like, I mean, I used to do more baking than I do now. I used to make caramel shortbread. That was quite satisfying, just because it's hard. but I was always glad when it worked.
I'm not a baker, so it was my daughter's birthday month in May, and so she wanted a Pokemon themed birthday party, and I was like, okay, a Pokeball cake, I can do that. It's round and it's a very simple. Yeah, that cake was 3 days of my life. would you not recommend?
I bake quite a lot. Anything that comes out as intended, I would say, is one of my favorites. So like, if I've practiced something and like for an event, it's like, oh yeah, this is how I want it to be and it tastes how I want it to be. That's always a win. I guess that's kind of a cop-out answer, but yeah, if I try something new and it works, I'm happy with that.
We are going to wrap up here because we are at time. Any last thoughts or words of advice from our panelists?
I can't think of anything that I haven't already said. If you haven't finished a book yet, finish the book first. I feel like that's, I mean, to be fair, I didn't necessarily need that advice when I was first publishing, but it is something, you can get overwhelmed by all the stuff that's not writing, so...
Yeah, get the book finished because you can't do anything without a book. Don't worry too much about getting every single technical detail correct. I think publishing direct is gaining more and more traction, at least with the other indie authors that I've been speaking to in the last year. So I think it's going to become a lot more mainstream and a lot less kind of, oh, we're the odd ones out for doing it. So I think that a lot of the processes that we use that maybe we struggled with or had to figure out will become more streamlined, like Book Funnel being a really good example of that. So I think if it's something that you're considering, I don't see a real downside to doing it other than the time you have to invest. So don't be put off by the idea of it because it can be really rewarding. And like you were saying earlier, it kind of gets rid of all those middlemen in between you and your reader, and which kind of brings you closer to your reader, which is quite nice. Plus, if you like an author and supporting them directly, it's like the best way to do that. Amazon being Amazon and what have you. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much to Emma and to Lauren for doing this live Q&A. One last pitch to everybody watching. Where can people find your books and who should read them?
So all my books are at my website, emmaladams.com. They're pretty much for sale there. If you like any kind of fantasy, I mean, I have epic fantasy, I have urban fantasy, I have contemporary, weird cross-genre fantasy that doesn't fit anywhere. I have paranormal mysteries, like cozies, and I also have really dark epic fantasy. So I have the whole range. I have some YA fantasy, I have adult fantasy. Basically, there's probably something, if you like weird, I say I write weird fantasy books. I find that about covers everything that I've written because it varies quite a lot, but weird fantasy books, some are more mainstream than others. Dragons are cool. A lot of my books have dragons in them, especially my fantasy books. They will have some kind of dragon. You can get the books there in pretty much any the only couple of them are in hardback, but all of them are in ebook paperbacks. There's some audiobooks. They're also on all retailers as well, but we've just been talking about buying direct, so I'm gonna have a Kickstarter, which I keep forgetting about. It's on the 11th of June that one starts, and it's for the third book in my current dark epic fantasy series, Death Disciple series. That's like the next thing that I'm focused on. So that's coming soon, and I should probably put the link to that on my website. Tweaking things.
Link will be in the description, so you can go click through. Link in the description.
Yeah. Everything is on my website as well, which is llmacrae.com. Link in the description. I also have a link in bio. So if you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can go to that. That has the sign-up list to my ARC list if you're ever interested in that. The events I'm attending, as soon as I confirm them, they go there. Patreon links for all the behind-the-scenes early access stuff too. And as far as my books, pretty much if you love classic fantasy or classic feeling fantasy with that whimsical nature that you enjoyed as a child, that bucket loads of magic and dragons and quests and adventure and a ragtag group of people thrown in together, that's what you're going to get from my books. It's pretty hopeful, which sometimes when the world is rubbish, you just want a little bit of that kind of smaller scale, more intimate stories within bigger epics. So regular people caught in the wrong place at the wrong time rather than special chosen ones. And yeah, pretty much everything is on the link in bio if it's not already on my website. So if I've forgotten anything, let me know.
Thank you so much again to you both. For anybody watching, make sure to like and share if you found this session helpful. Finally, if you're interested in learning more about using Kickstarter to sell direct, you should watch this other author panel I hosted on how to use Kickstarter to fund the production of your audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Bye-bye!